Actually, right now, women's movement is not in good terms with the government because the general idea of the government is that women should stay at home and bear their children and take care of the house, and of course if they want to work they can go into the labor market, but it's not their first responsibility, because their first responsibility is to be at home and to be with their family and children. So all the legislation, all the codes are made according to this idea. Of course, women's movement in Turkey is not a new movement. It has been, women have been struggling since the Ottoman Empire. And after the Ottoman Empire, when the Turkish Republic was founded, between 30s and 70s, the feminist movement in Turkey kind of slowed down because we had the right to be elected and everything. And then after 70s, beginning from the 80s, an intellectual feminist movement started again. And in Europe and in most of the countries, the civil code has changed before Turkey. In Turkey, the civil code changed in the beginning of 2000s, which was a little bit later than the Europe. So it has been a really long-term movement. It's not a new movement as compared to Europe or other parts of the world. But of course, before this government, actually, women's movement has always been not in good terms with the government. It was kind of a secondary issue for the governments, and I can tell that Turkish governments have never supported feminist movement in Turkey. Actually, right now, the labor force participation of women in Turkey is around 27%. When I was at university like 10 years ago, it was like 24%. So it's a little bit distance we have came through. It's not enough, actually. There are reasons for that. One of the main reasons is that we have a serious issue about kindergartens in Turkey. We have private kindergartens, but they are generally not affordable, and just middle or higher middle income women or families have access to them. We have very less state-owned public kindergartens or municipality-owned kindergartens or kindergartens of the public institutions. So most of the working women do not have access to the kindergartens financially. So this is a big problem in Turkey. This is one of the main reasons of women having little participation in the labor force. So women's organizations and platforms in Turkey have been struggling to force the state, the municipalities, the public institutions to open kindergartens. Of course, we have legislation for that. For instance, the workplaces, the private companies has to open kindergartens if they have, as far as I remember, more than 100 or 150 women working in their companies. But even though we have this in the legislation, in the reality, when we monitor the situation, this is not like that. Private companies pay their fines and then they are okay, they don't have to open the kindergarten. So paying the fine is easier and cheaper than opening the kindergarten. Another issue is that maternity leave in Turkey is right now 4 months. And generally women use most of the time after the delivery, like just a couple of weeks before the delivery and like 3 months or more after the delivery. This is too short. I mean, afterwards, if you want to take more leave, then you're not getting paid. Also, paternity leave it depends on the working condition of the person, the man, but at most it's 1 or 2 weeks. So all the burden is on the mother, and the burden is just, it's compensated with just 4 months, which is really very short time period. Another issue, a very important issue, is the working hours in Turkey, both for men and women. Especially in the private sector, the working hours are too long, like 9 or 10 hours per day, and for the cities like Istanbul, Ankara, Izmir, for the big cities there is a huge traffic jam problem. So you have to spend at least 2 hours on the way every day going to work or coming back to home, which is like you leave home like 7 in the morning and then you come home 7 or 8 in the evening, and then you have to reproduce yourself for the other day, and you have to take care of your family, you have to cook and you have to wash and you have to, I don't know, take care of the baby and everything. For all of these you have, I don't know, 1 or 2 hours, and then you go to bed at 10 or 11, and then next morning you wake up at 6 and you have to rush to the work. Also flexible hours. Most of the companies, private companies, if you're working to private sector, the work doesn't end in the workplace. You go home and then you have your laptop and you have your smartphone and you have to answer the emails. There are always urgencies and you have to take care of them. You have to answer the email like at 10 o'clock in the evening, and also during the weekends. So you're working all the time. Flexible hours is a total lie. Because of flexible hours we have started to work more. It's not a good thing for the employee, it's a good thing for the employer. Working unions, they represent mostly the workers, I mean the blue-collar workers. So they're active in this sphere, but when you come to the white-collar workers, I mean all the service sector and for the plaza workers, the things get complicated because I think there are very few people who are members of working unions as white-collar workers. There are reasons. One of the main reasons is that they work too much. I mean, as I talked about before, the flexible hours and that you have to work all the time, including the evenings and the weekends. There are always something during the weekends. Team building activities, I don't know, cycle meetings, trainings, or social activities of the company, picnics, I don't know, welcome to summer parties, Christmas parties, New Year's parties, everything that you have to attend to socialize and to be a decent, nice employee. So you're full. I mean, when are you going to go and attend the trade unions meeting? When are you going to have a connection with them? So the trade unions are kind of outdated, I would say. We need to build more like company networks, neighborhood networks, because, for instance, Istanbul is a huge city, and going from somewhere to another place, you have to spend like 2 hours, at least 1 hour, and then when are you going to do that? So if there is a network in your neighborhood, let's say in Taksim or in Kadıköy, small different networks in your neighborhood, or a network in your company, then it's easier, then it's more realistic. Actually, there has been a long-term feminist movement in Turkey, and right now we have, I think, around 350 or even now maybe 400 women's organizations, platforms, initiatives, research centers about women's studies, different kinds of organizations, foundations. So all these NGOs and academia and I don't know, lots of people, international NGOs, there has been a really lively movement in Turkey. Of course, we are facing difficulties, especially right now as we have the emergency state in Turkey. There has been most of the women's organizations have been closed in Turkey after this emergency state has started. It's been more than 6 months, 7 months actually, and probably it will be going on for a while. So the political situation is a challenging situation for every organization and for women's movement and women's organizations in Turkey right now. For instance, we have a platform of women's labor and employment, and it has been 11 years that we have started it and keep on working. It's called Callegher platform, and Callegher platform basically produces information about women's labor and employment, and it has also lobbying activities. We go to municipalities, we go to ministries and state institutions, and we force them to make legislation to increase women's labor and employment and to make women have decent jobs, to have good and humane working conditions, not just increasing the number, but having decent jobs is also important in women's case, because lots of women are having contract works or home-based work or project-based work or part-time employment, which is like we call it precarization of women's labor in Turkey, and also it happens in most of the countries in Europe when we look at them. Also, informalization is a big issue. I think feminist movement in Turkey is quite well known among Europe or West, if you like, and there is a long-term cooperation between the feminists in Turkey and feminists in Europe, and also feminists in the Middle East, like east of Turkey. So actually, from the feminist colleagues from Europe, I haven't felt that there has been a discrimination towards the feminists in Turkey or towards the women's movement in Turkey. We have a long-term collaboration, and they know the cases of Turkey, and they have founded solidarity between the women here and the women in Europe. Just it's not from feminists, I think it's from non-feminists maybe, or people who are not very familiar with the situation in Turkey. Sometimes I have come across with some, I would say, orientalistic point of views, like about the issues of honor killing or the peace situation in Turkey. Because, for instance, when it happens in Turkey, some people in Europe would say, not feminists, I would say, or some of the feminists maybe, they would think it's honor killing happens only in the Middle East. But when it happens in Europe or when it happens in the United States, it's called love killing, love murders. It's the same. I mean, I don't see that it's any different from honor killing. It's still an imposition towards women and her life from a man's male and patriarchal perspective. So it's not different. the love killings or honor killings are the same consequences of the same mentality. I think initiatives and platforms, this kind of coming together things are important both in the national level and in international level. So I think this kind of collaborations as platforms or initiatives between Turkey and other European countries are quite important to feel more powerful, to have more power to for advocacy, for lobbying, to change things, to change the legislation, to monitor what's happening, both in the national level and for the whole Europe. Because when we have this collaboration, we know what the other people are doing in Italy, in Spain, in Greece, in Turkey. So we know that what we can do. We can, know our borders, and we can go above our borders, and we can use the examples of the other countries, and we can go to the governments and ask for more. Look, it has happened in Greece, it has happened in Italy, and we have to do it in Turkey too.